So this next video is going to look at some of the questions that I get asked about my epilepsy. I've tried to cover some of the more general questions as well as how it affects me personally. It varies a lot from person to person, so this is just my insight and my own experiences. There's a ton of extra information over at the Epilepsy Society website, or alternatively you can check out the NHS website for more information as well. So the first question I've got is, what is epilepsy? Which is fair enough to ask that because there are so many different types, and as I said before, it affects people in so many different ways. So epilepsy it's a neurological condition where a person's prone to having seizures which start in the brain. So there are many causes of seizures, so not everybody who has a seizure or even multiple seizures actually has epilepsy. Epilepsy is normally only diagnosed after having more than one seizure. There's loads of different types, so knowing that someone has epilepsy doesn't really give you a lot of insight into how their epilepsy actually affects them. So, on to the causes of epilepsy. First of all, there's symptomatic epilepsy, and that is when the cause is known and it might develop because of, say, a stroke or a head injury, maybe a tumour or an infection such as meningitis. These causes, they might show up on an MRI scan, and it's a lot easier to pinpoint where the seizures have started from. Now, on the other side of that, there's idiopathic epilepsy, which is when it's thought to be as a result of a genetic tendency. For example, my mum has epilepsy, so it's likely that that plays a part in my inheritance of a low seizure threshold. So everybody has a seizure threshold, and anyone can actually have a seizure, but we all have a different tolerance to them. So someone with a high seizure threshold is less likely to have a seizure, and many factors need to come into play before one actually occurs. Someone with a lower seizure threshold is more likely to have seizures day to day, so this is like me. Not as many factors need to come into play before my seizure threshold is crossed. So, for example, if I get too tired or I feel particularly stressed, I can reach my seizure threshold for that day before I've even got out of bed in the morning. Another common factor for women is hormones and how these fluctuate from month to month as well as across the lifespan, but this will be a topic for another video. So I've got idiopathic generalised epilepsy, so this means that it's likely that I inherited it as part of a genetic trait. Generalised epilepsy itself means that the whole brain is involved and it's affected by miscommunications of the neurons rather than just one specific part of my brain. However, before I have a full seizure, I get what's known as an aura, and for me this is a sensation that starts in my stomach. And in some ways it's a good thing because it can give you or somebody else a kind of warning that something is going on and that a seizure might happen. So auras vary from person to person, but for me, the closest thing that I can describe it as is like when you suddenly go on a ride at a theme park, that sensation of suddenly falling and it leaves your tummy feeling a bit confused. That's the sensation that I get before I have a seizure. So it's pretty needless to say that I don't really enjoy roller coasters anymore. So, as I said before, I normally get an aura beforehand. Sometimes I can remember that I've had a seizure or at least guess that I might have done because I can't account for a certain period of time. I can never remember the entire thing. For the majority, I'm completely, or at least almost completely unconscious and have no recollection of what's happening around me. But I do have some memories of certain events where I can remember a seizure starting. So I'd had this aura, this feeling in my stomach, and I got to the point where I had no control over my body, and I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move or anything. But I had this sensation as though I'd been plugged into the wall and the mains electricity was just running through my entire body. I could hear people talking around me, but I could only hear sounds and not really make out words or who the voices belonged to. It was a bit like I was inside a tumble dryer and being thrown around all over the place with electricity pulsing through me at the same time. I know that might sound a really weird thing to compare it to, but it's the closest thing that I've been able to come up with. And then of course there's the really confusing part of when you come round. You don't really know what's happened, at least to start with. And for me, a couple of times it's taken me a really long time to realise who's with me. I've had my friends there, and I can't recognise who they are, even though they're trying to offer me reassurance. And it takes me a good 20 minutes or so to realise actually I'm looking either at my partner or my best friend. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of the effect of my seizures, is that it leaves my muscles aching and it leaves me tired and quite grumpy afterwards, and that's not nice. But my brain's so confused that it can't even unjumble the things that are really familiar. Seizures have had a pretty big impact on most parts of my life, but the main thing that I would say it's affected is my independence. It's really difficult to do things by myself. I'm not allowed to drive, so I have to rely on other people to get me places, or rely on public transport, which I don't mind doing, but it does have its limitations. I do have a job, but it's quite hard to commit to many hours because I don't know how I'll feel from day to day. Plus, it's in the middle of nowhere, so getting the bus it's a bit of a problem, because I think I can only get there once a week, and even then I won't arrive until halfway through the day. So as I said, public transport, it really does have its limitations. So the other thing that it's had a major impact on is friendships. Unfortunately, I've lost contact with a number of people that I was once close with because of my seizures. The people who've stuck by me have been really patient, especially when I end up having to cancel plans last minute because I've had a seizure or just generally feel unwell. I have friends who are spread out all over the place because obviously I went to uni and everybody comes from all over the country. And when my seizures get bad, I don't take any chances. I can't travel by myself, but I think it's hard for some people to understand that I either have to cancel, or at the very least I need to have somebody with me, so that worst case scenario, if I have a seizure, there's somebody there to deal with it properly. To be honest, I don't expect people to understand, because I think it's hard to if you've never experienced it, but I really do appreciate the people who've tried to understand and been as patient as they can. I'm now on my 4th week of Keppra, which does have a proper name that I can't say, so it should be on the screen for you now. So far, touch wood, it's working really well, but it really is early days. I'm actually planning another video which will cover my experiences of taking Keppra, the side effects that I've had and still do have sometimes, and the plan of action from here, so keep checking back for updates on that. At the moment I'm unable to drive. I've just had to surrender my driving licence to the DVLA because the neurologist has specifically told me that I'm not to drive under any circumstances until I'm seizure free for about a year. However, many people who have epilepsy with seizures that are under control using medication, they learn and continue to drive. However, I know that when I get around to it, the insurance is going to be absolutely horrendous. So I didn't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to stop it there for now. If anyone has any other questions, then fire away and I'll make an FAQ part 2. Keep checking the site for updates. I'm working on the campaign every day, even if it all seems quiet. There's loads going on in the background.